This is part 3 of a presentation Wyken Seagrave gave to the Derby Scientific Club on the 10th of February, 2009, with the title History of the Universe, Fact or Fiction.
Okay, well I'm going to move on to the second half of the story, because the other thing I wanted to talk to you about was how do we tell this story as a work of fiction? History of the universe is fiction. This is what I want to cover. What are the problems and the benefits? How do you do it? What's the scenario? What characters? Oh, and this is all in white as opposed to the black that we've had for the factual side. This is colour themed here. How do you write fiction? So you've got to create characters, you've got to plot, you've got to make it credible. I'm going to have to introduce a fantasy element in order to tell this story. I'm going to have to use dialogue, and I'm going to have to use beautiful language. And what I'm going to talk about, I spent the last 7 years so I started off writing the History of the Universe as a work of fact. Got a website that gets 1 million visitors a year, mostly American college students. And now I've spent 7 years trying to retell that story as a work of fiction. I've just finished the first volume. So there are certain benefits to telling the story in fiction. First of all, people love fiction. They can relate to it. It brings it to life. Fiction appeals to people where dry fact doesn't. A history of the universe as a work of fiction, as far as I know, would be completely unique. So I would have a unique selling point there. Characters engage people, and it's a long story. I mean, I've just finished first volume. I won't tell you how far back I've gone, but it ain't very far, looked at from one point of view. So it's going to be a long story, and I need the characters to engage the readers so that they will want to pursue. It's a motivation. However, there are problems. How do you tell this story? How do you get your characters to go back in time to the Big Bang and survive? I mean, it's just nonsense, isn't it, really? But you've got to do it in a convincing way. People will only read fiction if they can live it, if they believe it. So they've got to at least suspend their disbelief, and they've got to be able to live it. How do you create characters? I started off not having the faintest idea how to create characters. And writing dialogue and description and beautiful passages, all of these skills are difficult to learn. The scenario that I ended up with, after about 5 or 6 different attempts at weird and wonderful things, was fairly straightforward. So it's based in CERN. This is the Large Hadron Collider in Geneva. This is Lake Geneva up here. There's the airport. This is CERN, the main offices, the main base there, and there's some of the accelerators. So what happens is that they send particles round these rings, and they collide, and there are about 6 of these collision points. And this one down here is called Atlas. This is Atlas. It's as big as a cathedral, 100 metres underground. There's some people down there to give you some scale. So particles come in each end of these tubes, they collide in the middle, and then you've got a whole series of detectors that measure. And you heard the story, was it September, when they turned the LHC on, and it lasted a week, and then there was a leak. The leakage was actually in one of the tubes. In order to make so they're sending protons around these beams. To control the protons, they need very strong magnetic fields. They therefore have to have superconducting magnets, so they're within a few degrees of absolute zero, and somebody had welded up, so they take more current than the whole of Geneva. In fact, they only run this thing in the summer because they can't afford the electricity in the winter. They buy electricity from France. And somebody had welded the cables up wrong, and they got a helium leak, and they're having to now, to fix it, they've got to take these tubes. It's complicated anyway, so they don't expect to get it fixed until the summer. So that's the Large Hadron Collider, this big circle. Atlas is one of these detectors here. The plot is that a black hole is created inside Atlas. And in fact, that's one of the things they really expect and hope to do. Stephen, what's his face? What's his name? Hawking. Stephen Hawking actually went down to Atlas, and he said that he would only win the Nobel Prize if they actually managed to make a black hole, because he predicts that a small black hole will evaporate through what's now called Hawking radiation. But in my story, of course, it doesn't. And a wormhole is created, and people can go down this wormhole if they go back in time, and there's a whole story about what happens. Right, characters. How do you design characters? I use something called the Enneagram, which is a ready-made set of 9 standard characters. You can buy them off the shelf. In fact, you don't need to buy them, they give them away. And they tell you the basic characteristics of characters. So, for example, Maria up here, she is a sensitive person. She's not egotistical. She listens to other people. She likes to encourage other people. She's a loving woman. Danny, on the other hand, is a very highly motivated, workaholic, self-centred, driven, a bit like me really, driven, obsessive individual who will do anything to achieve what he wants, and so on and so on and so on. And so those are the characters. Then I've got to describe what they look like. So I've used some software called FrameForge to create. Now, FrameForge is used by filmmakers to produce storyboards, and you can. This is a shot from FrameForge. You can take your character, you can position them, you can dress them, you can decide what age they are, change the colour of their clothes, change the style of their clothes. You can build sets with them. So I've got into virtual reality, building objects. I don't think I've got a slide here, but I've built all sorts of objects. So this exercise has taken me into realms that I never even dreamed of when I started. And I do that in order to be able to visualise a scene. Some writers can sit down, close their eyes, and see a scene. I'm afraid I haven't got that kind of imagination. I have to see it. And when I see it, it looks to me completely different from when I just try and think about it. I think I realise things are happening that I could never have imagined. By positioning the characters in a scene and moving them around, it feels completely different. So that has helped me enormously, and I'll come back to that in a minute. I also use Flash, which is a standard piece of software that people use to produce animation on the internet, and I use it for quickly sketching out. So this is a sketch of a place called Entroilia, which is featured in the story. It has to be credible. My descriptions of the place have to be credible. So I went to CERN. I went down to Atlas. This is one of the scientists there who took me down. These are the toilets. They were just building the underground stuff there. This is a village called Shuley, which is about a kilometre away from CERN. So I can describe it in graphic detail, and that helps. That gives me confidence that I know what I'm talking about, and that what I'm saying is something like correct. I also introduce fantasy elements. So the story is called Time Crystal, and it features bits of crystal that allow people. I mean, the basic gist of the story is that two of the characters are absorbed by the black hole. They do something, and time stops. But the wormhole that's created allows characters to go back in time. So a wormhole is created, and some crystal appears on the Earth, and time stops in the universe everywhere except near these fragments of crystal. If you're holding a fragment of crystal, you're alive, otherwise you're dead. And they can also talk through the crystal. It's a bit like a modern telecommunication system, and they can talk to the people, and the people who are absorbed by the black hole find themselves outside the universe on this planet called Entroilia, which is populated by giant ants and bees, because the way evolution has worked in that place the invertebrates have evolved intelligence. And these people tell the characters who've got the crystal that they have to bring them down the tunnel. And as they go down the tunnel, lo and behold, they go back in time, and they're protected by being inside the tunnel. They go back in time to the Big Bang. And so I can stop at different horizons in history, and as they go back, they have to liberate fragments of crystal. Fragments of crystal got trapped at different places in history, and they have to have adventures in history. So they go to all these different places that we've been talking about, stars and planets and the origin of life, and they see all that and they live it. So that's the scenario of the story. So it's called timecrystal.co.uk, and I can publish it as a novel. Because I've got all that storyboard stuff, I can publish it as a graphic novel. I can also publish it as a video. And in fact, last weekend I produced the first video. So, how long have we got? Oh, I've got loads of time. I can now show you first the video of the first episode.
Lovely. I love fantasy.
Well, there won't be a lot of fantasy in this bit, but it will be eventually. Right, so how do we work this?
That was part 3 of a presentation Wyken Seagrave gave to the Derby Scientific Club on the 10th of February, 2009, with the title History of the Universe, Fact or Fiction. For more information on this topic, visit www.historyoftheuniverse.com. In the first 2 parts of the presentation, Wyken followed the story of the creation of the universe and the evolution of life on Earth. For all 3 parts, visit www.timecrystal.co.uk.